So I'm going to talk about a few things I probably never talked about before. Not online, maybe people in the real world I have, friends or something in the real world. A person's better off staying single unless they really test the character of a person. And I mean really test the character. So I'm going to speak from a man's perspective. So if there's any women out there, just understand I'm speaking from a man's perspective, and I'm sure the women have their own stuff that they see. But I've actually watched my whole life, and I've experienced where you date this woman or you marry this woman and she starts doing some crazy stuff. And you're sitting there and you're thinking, what is she doing? And then you put all the puzzle pieces together and you look at other situations and you look at other marriages and you look at other people who stayed married, and it's like sometimes you look back and you think, well, did that woman cause so much chaos in that man's life to force him to cheat so that he will accept her cheating, and then she changes him into a pimp? It's a marriage. It's an outward show. It looks like a normal, healthy home, but she's turned him into a pimp without him knowing that he's been manipulated, and he's going to accept her, and then she's going to say, well, you did, whether she abandoned ship, whether she left the house, whether she did something crazy, or she sent her sister or girlfriend or somebody in to try to get the man to accept that kind of life. Now, it's usually not a saved person that does it, but if a saved man marries an unsaved woman, religious but lost, they play these weird games, and if you sit back and you put all the data points together, you're like, oh, and it takes years to see it. As a child, you're watching it, and you're seeing stuff go on. In the hospitality industry, you see it. And you see this woman she's trying to look normal. Okay, so she's over here living in this room over here, and you go in there and do some work. It could be apartment or hotel or anything. You go in there and do some work, and you look at her walls and the way she decorates, and you're noticing that's weird. But she's also trying to find a man. She's out here playing a bunch of men, but she's also trying to find a stable man that she thinks she can deceive or will put up with that lifestyle. And you're sitting back and you actually see it playing out. And it's usually some man gets out of jail and he moves in with her and he becomes her pimp, and she's out there doing her thing. But that's her. For outward show, it looks like her stable man. And then, so I saw some patterns through the years, and I thought, that's happening more than people realize. And then if you go online and you look at all the crime shows, you look at all the cheater shows, the bounty hunter D, you look at all the shows, and some of those people have 10 or 20 people in their phone that they're seeing and talking to and flirting with and all that. And I'm sure it's both sides, but I'm just speaking from a man. And so why she got all these different men? Because it's a recurring income, right? But she's got this main man that makes everything look normal on the outside. And if you really step back, and now some people, they want that normalcy, so they're dealing drugs. Some people want that normalcy because they're doing illegal stuff, but they want to look normal to the world. But there's a lot of crime going on in high money places, neighborhoods, and you look back and over the years, and you're like, there's more crime going on than people realize, illegal stuff going on than people realize. And I'm not ever going to mention names, but growing up and just living in life, I just would listen to people talk, and I would rub shoulders on different jobs that I've had. I've had 120 jobs, and I see the same patterns. And I've actually seen in the past, I don't really care anymore, but something made me think of it recently. Today something happened. And I've seen businesses that are like a front for something else. And so all these front businesses, all these front hotels, a lot of these places, it's just a front for other stuff going on under the table, you know. Like there's one hotel over here. Every day the pilots come in and they go there. And if the pilot goes into the room, but the next day when the housekeeping cleans it, it hasn't been used. But the stewardess room, it's been used. So the stewardess, not only are they making money on the airplane, but they're also making money at the hotel after they get to their destination. And it's just ongoing, and it's happening in high dollar places and the low dollar, and it's wild. And they really think that their words and their actions, their behavior, and their doctrine won't reveal it, but they all start to sound the same, especially over time, because they create a groove in everything out of their mouth. So let's say you're over here in the high dollar area, and the way they talk is no different than over here in the hood, you know. And so, or you go downtown and the people on the street corner talking the exact same talk as somebody over here in the high dollar, and you're like, oh, the only difference is just where you live, you know. And there's usually like somebody in the background holding them up, you know. I remember when I was younger, I used to see the ones who got in the most trouble. They had a big family that would always rescue them, you know. But eventually, even that crashes and burns. Life always catches up with them. And so, you'll see them get hurt. They'll mess with the wrong person or something, and you'll see one of them hurt their leg or their hip or something like that. And then it's done. It's game over. And so they thought they were going to just keep running that way forever, and then all of a sudden it's game over, you know. And so God is not mocked. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap, and that includes the women, you know. And they think it's going to keep going as they get older, as they age, as they let their guard down. Because their heart is getting harder, they have to drink because they have a hard heart. They have a conscience that's seared, you know. Whoredom, wine, and new wine take away the heart. So the more they do this kind of stuff and live that lifestyle, the harder their heart gets. The more they got to drink or do some kind of drug, because they're drowning out their heart. I talked to somebody for 2 years, and she seemed legit. She had a good head on her shoulders, but then the more the time went on, you saw that she was dealing drugs around the back of the building. She would get her prescription drugs from the doctor, and then she would be selling them to make some money. And so you would watch that, and you would say, it's going to catch up. It's going to catch up. It will catch up with them, you know. But they think that they're going to just keep getting by because they're good at talking. They're good at being a con artist or a dealer or whatever. But it costs money to ride the train, you know. And the train always has a stop. And the cycles of time will eventually mess somebody up. But eventually it's a health thing, because their conscience is seared as with a hot iron. And so they have to drink so they can't get convicted of sin or illegal stuff that they're doing, or blaming others, or throwing it on somebody else. They want a scapegoat, right? So most of the time, these people want a scapegoat. They can live any way they want and throw it onto somebody else. And so that scapegoat eventually dries up, and people wake up to the game, and they don't want to take that person's sin anymore and take the weight of it, And so they think they're going to get by, but they're not. They think they're going to get by with it, but they're not. And it just builds and it builds. It's like a snowball effect. And what I usually see is, like, if they're doing something crazy like that, ends up in a fight, and somebody gets their leg hurt or their hip out of joint or something like that, and because they were gallivanting around the whole world, and they hurt their leg, and they blame it on something, car wreck, but they probably got involved with the wrong person, and somebody didn't want to pay them, and they tried to fight them, and they got beat up because they didn't get their money. I've actually seen that. Like 20 years ago, I went in a room to do some maintenance work, and I went back to the manager. I said, the couch is cut. I mean, the chair's cut, the picture's cut, the headboard's cut, everything's cut with a knife. And he laughed. He said the girl staying there got mad because she didn't get paid. Cut up the whole room. And the way he said it, in a way, I was like, oh, so he knew what that guy was doing. He knew what was going on, but he was the manager pretending like he didn't know what was going on. But they know. It was under the table, not under the table, but under the radar. And so they know what's going on. But because somebody's got to pay for the room. And I said, well, who's going to eat the cost? He said, our insurance will pay for it. So he was protecting the pilot or the whoever was there on a regular basis, protecting that guy instead of making him pay for it, so he would keep coming back and renting a room. Talking about somebody hurting their leg. Look, as soon as I talk about that guy's limping right there, hurt his leg evidently. And you see him out here begging, see him down here acting stupid on the side of the road. Now he's hurt. Somebody beat him up, And so you see these women that get beat up. And so they realize they got to have them a live-in pimp or something, to protect them. And so the ones that get hurt, they go down fast. And I've watched it for 30, 40 years. I've watched it where people think they get by with stuff, to do evil, to do wrong, to lie, to break the law, to drug deal or pimp and prostitute and all that. And they think they get by with it, but I said the wrong saying. How's it go? The roosters come home to roost or something. The whatever it is. Chickens come home to roost or something. I don't know. I forgot the saying, but my point is, there's always a payday. There's always a payday. And if you're not careful and you're not being aware of your surroundings, somebody might pull you into something you don't want to be a part of, and you have to be on guard. Back to what I'm saying. Before you marry somebody, you better test their character. You better hang out with them, see how they act around certain people, the conversations they have, if they're real, genuine, fake, if they're people pleasers. Test them, try the spirit, see if they can endure hardship. Because a lot of these people, they don't want to work, but they don't want to be poor, So there's a lot going on in this life that if you read the book of Proverbs, all that to say, if you heed the book of Proverbs, if you heed the book of Proverbs, it'll save your life. If you start to see some data points where somebody's iffy about stuff, they're acting a little bit suspicious, then what you need to do is start setting some boundaries and start separating yourself from these people. Because if it's suspect, there's a reason. If a person is legit, then there's going to be a feeling that they're legit. There's not going to be any contradiction and stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of people trying to pull you in as a scapegoat for their sin and their rebellion and their lack of discipline. And a lot of times they want money. It's all about outward showing image. They got to have the best. Instead of being content in that house, they want a big house, you know. And so they got to have some more income coming in under the table. And if you think about it, mostly that's cash. I saw something recently. I can't talk about it, but I can just tell you there's some people in jail. There's some people in jail right now, been in jail for 6 months because they were doing some crazy stuff. And I can't even talk about it right now. Maybe in 2 or 3 years I'll talk about it. But I see stuff all the time because I've been in an industry and I've been around people that don't know that I'm saved, and I'm just a spy. I'm just listening to them, and they're actually spilling the beans, and I'm just sitting back listening. I'm not a narc. I don't go to the police or anything. If I hear somebody saying something, I just act like I didn't hear it, but I put it down in my mental note that to stay away from that person, you know. That person's trouble. And the people like that person are trouble. In other words, birds of a feather flock together. If they're talking like if they're talking like a criminal, they're talking like a prostitute, they're talking like a thief, they're talking like a drug dealer, if they're talking and hanging out with those kind of people, then I stay away from them. Because my grandmother told me when I was a kid, birds of a feather flock together. And it means if they talk the same talk, something's going on. Like some of these CEOs, top rich millionaire, billionaire CEOs, get into bad trouble, and you know the other CEOs kind of start to isolate themselves from those other ones because they all hang out together until somebody gets in trouble, and then they all start to say, okay, I gotta get away from that person. I need to disconnect from that person. Whew. Long story short, especially right now with the economy like it is, you better get in Proverbs, and you better stick in Proverbs. You better pray to God that He gives you a peaceful and quiet life. The Bible talks about pray for a peaceful and quiet life. Pray for your country that is peaceful, quiet, orderly. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if anybody tries to steal your peace, that is demonic. He says He would have all men to come to the knowledge of the truth, that you might walk in the Spirit, love, agape love, joy, peace. He didn't say happiness, because happiness is up and down. Joy in the midst of trouble. Peace that passes all understanding. Goodness, meekness, temperance, faith. Meekness is controlled power. They see somebody meek and they think, oh, I can get over on that person. And they don't even know what they're facing off with, because they don't know where you came from. They don't know the people you were raised around and all the stuff that you saw, you know. I had an uncle, I think he's dead now, but he owned about 4 or 5 bars. And you go in there to help them clean up, and you're like, this place stinks. This place is dirty. People go to a bar, and it's dark, and they're in this dirty, stinking, dungy place and they think this is fun. They don't even know what's in the back warehouse. It's just a mess. It stinks. I saw him make a lot of money and then he went broke. Make a lot of money, went broke. Make a lot of money, went broke. It's like, come on, man. He would go broke and he'd run a drop cord to my mom's house and plug in the drop cord just to get his power, just to have some heat. Then he would get rich and then he'd go broke, get rich, go broke. It's like, how many cycles you gotta go through before you see how to do it, you know? But imagine trying to manage a building full of drunks and workers that are probably getting tips under the table and giving out free beers and all that. And that was before cameras and before the internet and all that. It's like, you talk, and fights would break out. You'd hear about fights all the time. People going to jail. This is before the DUI laws were really bad. People would drive home drunk. So I saw what was going on around me, and even as a child, and it's like, yuck, I don't want to be around this crew. And then you come to find out it's rampant. It don't even have to be the bar scene. It can be your next door neighbor doing stuff like that. It's just rampant. The vices, the people get hooked on those vices, and it's usually about money from one side, and then there's fighting, and you look online and you watch the law channels where all these court cases and people are still shooting each other, killing each other, jealous, trying to take out a lawsuit. Take out a insurance policy, or somebody's trying to steal their kids, child support stuff. I mean, it's just crazy how people plan, even to this day and age, even with the phone that pings, the Ring cameras, the GPS, and they still are out there killing people and doing criminal stuff, thinking they're not going to get caught. It blows your mind. It actually blows your mind. And the people who are like caught up in this for a long time, when you talk to them, they have a fast answer for everything. Boom, 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 boom. Because they've learned to lie. They're master deceivers. They've learned to lie so much that it's just second nature. And if you take notes and you say, well, wait a minute, they're contradicting themselves. Everything they said was a lie. And you're like, yuck, I got to get away from this person. This person's trouble. But I forget what that saying is. The birds come home to roost or something. It always happens. Cirrhosis of the liver, diabetes, dementia, all kinds of stuff. And they think that they are not a statistic, but everybody's a statistic. And if you start to plan early to recover, because a lot of people, they're like right there on the edge, and they have there's like, we're like, okay, if you change it now, you can restore. But if you keep going down that path, it's going to get worse, and it's going to exponentially get worse, you know. It happens fast, you know. Let's see if I can get this car inspected. Whew. jig is up. I see now, when I was a kid, I thought, why am I raised around these kind of people? Why am I raised around this kind of person, these people? And as I got older, I thought, oh, because I was like, as a kid, I was like a spy, watching these people do things they shouldn't be doing, illegal stuff, and you're like, oh, if they're doing it here, they're doing it everywhere. It's like, I gotta be on guard, stay away from these people. And then don't think it ain't happening in the churches either. And think about it. Half the killings, like if you hear something about a church, somebody shot somebody, or it's usually something like that going on in the church too. You probably, just like me, have seen stuff that you can't talk about probably ever your whole life until people die off, you know. Like my neighbors across the street. The only reason he was a deacon, he's dead. They're dead now. It's because he was a millionaire and he ran a laundromat. And all them women that came in there and his wife didn't know about. And then his wife that he loved, or loved him, she died. And then he married this other woman, Clara was her name. And he was really sad about his first wife dying, but that was God's judgment on him, that he was cheating on her all them times while he was at the laundromat at night, you know. God judged him, and he had all that regret. He was a deacon, but he was proud of that when he was talking about it. I thought, man, you're sick. You're sick. Let's see if I can get this thing inspected.